Hi, let's start your comparison with the top players at your stakes. Let's begin with Preflop. We can notice that their open raises are sometimes a bit smaller, sometimes a bit wider, but for example on the SB they only open 43%. At the same time, their folds to 3 bets are also lower than yours. So compared to the field, it turns out you might be overfolding a bit, but most likely you could be shifting more hands into 4 bets. But here too you can see that they 4 bet wider. That is, because they move part of their folding range into 4 bets, they end up playing these situations a bit better. So it's also very much worth carefully considering that on the preflop, you should be 4 betting a significantly wider range of hands when you're 3 bet, rather than simply just calling or outright folding. The next thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the block of cold calls. I've already mentioned that you have very few cold calls, and overall you can add more cold calls. And you can see that the top players at your limit are doing this. So people can play with cold calls, um, and accordingly this can bring in additional profit. Aham. That is, I can click on anything here and often see positive values. So it's also incredibly important to have cold calls as a significant part of your overall strategy and approach. That's the next crucial remark I wanted to make. Next, against 4 bets. On the left is yours, on the right is the top players against a squeeze. So, a little off track against a 4 bet, 5 bet shove. Here it's 16% and for you it's 12. So most likely against 4 bets, you sometimes, or rather a bit more often, choose to call instead of shoving, and accordingly this too can generate profit. But here in reality there are very few hands, so overall this could just be a margin of error. And the most important thing, what you definitely should pay attention to here is the total squeeze. Yours is 7.3, while the top players have 8.4, so they squeeze a bit more often, a bit more aggressively. That's also something to keep in mind. Next, on the left is yours, on the right are the top players. Pay attention to the bottom block. WTSD is 28, single raise pot is 28. In single raise pots, your WTSD is 32. So you call down a lot in situations when it's a single raise pot. So naturally, this also affects your results. Also, pay attention to your WSF. In 3-bet pots, the top players don't really get out of line, they don't bluff much, so they play more straightforwardly, and because of that, their WTSD is higher, but your WSF is 43, and in 3-bet pots, your WTSD is lower. But at the same time, your WSF in single raised pots is 60, while theirs is 57, so you win more often. So in small pots, you probably put a bit more pressure, and because of that, you can win both here and there. Next, regarding the general stats, folds. This block here is about folding 2 bets. Their fold in position is 39, yours is 31. So this is all about calling down. And if the pot is less than 30 blinds on the river, they fold 57, 346. Again, this is all about calling down. And accordingly, their folds out of position are also a bit higher. And they have 45 on the flop, you have 41. And on the river, when the pot is less than 30, they fold 67, you 54. So this is exactly about your WTSD in single raised pots. Next, playing in position when you are the pre-flop raiser. Your flop c-bet stats are the same, but on the turn they bet a bit more because they don't check the majority of their river range, so they continue comfortably. And because of this, they don't have those imbalances where the turn is low and the river is high. Their betting is very balanced. Also, c-bet fold on the flop, 39 versus your 34, so they easily let go of some trash hands and don't really worry about it. The main and most crucial point to pay very close attention to next in this particular scenario is indeed betting directly into a check. I actually quite like your strategic bet into a check significantly more than their approach. Subsequently, we then have the sequence of a c-bet call, followed by a check-check, and ultimately culminating in a river fold. Consequently, it is evident that they tend to give up on the river much more frequently and readily than you typically do in these situations. In other words, you play very aggressively with raises and calls. They don't do that, but I think your strategy is more profitable. Here, it's up to you to decide which direction to lean towards. Next, c-bet on the flop, c-bet again, then check and a river fold. Here their raise is very small, meaning they play completely straightforward, don't deviate, and don't try anything creative. Your aggressive strategy might be more profitable in these situations. Accordingly, I would think about some sort of middle ground between the two options. But again, it's your decision to make. Here, people have a higher win rate than the one you mentioned. Next, check on the flop and a fold on the turn. So if they check the flop, they calmly fold on the turn and don't get into complicated situations. You, on the other hand, are not ready to fold on the turn, you play more aggressively with raises, and you're also not willing to fold on the river. So this is all about your tendency to call down, which overall can hurt your win rate. Next, 2 checks and a fold on the river. You have a call down rate of 51 while they have 63, so there's no call down tendency. But at the same time, I like your raises more. And against donk bets, overall, it's more or less okay for both. Then in multi-way pots, so it's pretty similar on both sides. Next, preflop raises out of position. On the right are the top stats, on the left are yours. Wait a second, I didn't switch it. Now, on the right are the top stats and on the left are your stats. Overall, the c-bet stats are more or less the same. Next, c-bet folds. Again, notice that people with better results than yours tend to fold more actively. In other words, they don't get into tough spots. If they miss, they fold, that's it. And as a result, your c-bet call on the flop is much higher. Next, c-bet raise on the flop is 1 out of 4 compared to 7 or 8. I prefer more aggressive actions here over passive ones. Again, that's just my personal opinion. I can't insist